Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. Together on this show, we have explored the many, many ways that our earlier experiences set up the patterns for our relationships, especially our romantic relationships. We've also explored how we are not at all impervious to the powers of the macro factors at play. That is cultural messaging and socialization. Well, today we're going to be discussing how painful early experiences, certain kinds of neurowiring or diagnoses like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, plus the modern landscape of our online dating world and hookup culture laden with uncertainty, ambiguity, even tendencies towards idealization can lead individuals to experience limerence. What is limerence, you ask? Well, limerence is defined as a state of being infatuated or obsessed with another person, typically characterized by a strong desire for reciprocation of one's feelings. And I'm going to be discussing limerence today with journalist and author Amanda McC, whose brand new book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover, comes out today. This wonderful book is part self-help, part memoir, and part cultural investigation. You're going to hear Amanda and I discuss the macro cultural factors that may shape and trigger limerence in individuals. And then you're also going to hear about Amanda's personal experiences with limerence and how she approached her healing journey, learning to embrace an intimate partnership with all of its realities and flaws and challenges and ordinariness and all of the great and beautiful stuff too. I'm excited for you to hear our conversation, which I think speaks to an experience that many of us can relate to in some way. Having a crush is, of course, super fun at times. Plus, one-sided longing can be very useful in terms of keeping ourselves engaged, but also safe. And isn't that what so many of our patterns are all about? Well, let's hear from Amanda McC. Amanda, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It's an honor to get to be on your show and speak with you.
Well, I think it's fun that we're turning the tables here because you interviewed me for this fantastic book that we're going to get into, and I've been a guest on your show, so I'm really excited to have you in my house this time and to be hosting you.
Thank you.
So I want to really get into the topic of limerence because you have done such a remarkable job of writing a fantastic book for all of us to help us understand it better. And I've got so many questions for you, but I want to start with the question that I ask all of our guests. So are you ready for the Reimagining Love question?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Amanda,
I'm going to be talking it out.
You're going to be talking it. We're going to get to hear. We're like right in the front row hearing you as you put this together in real time. And I love it. Amanda, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
I guess the one that comes to mind the most is probably my daughter. She's 5. And especially as I've been writing this book and as it's coming out, and she knows it's so important to me. And I think she's been aware of it for at least the past 2.5 years that I've focused so much of my time on it. And I think in terms of reimagining love with her, it's been interesting. I think the thing that comes up first is that she's been talking about crushes too, and little crushes maybe she has in kindergarten. And she tells me, Daddy has a crush on me, and we kind of play that out. And she recently asked me should you tell your crush? This is a kindergartner. Should you tell your
Oh.
crush that you like them? And we kind of talked about, do you,
Oh.
well, there's that risk that they
Mhm.
may say, they may be excited, they may smile, they may say nothing, they may say something that's embarrassing, or you might find out that they like you as well.
Mhm.
And so that's been kind of interesting. Instead, she kind of flipped it. Recently, came home and told me that she had told her crush that I thought he was cute, that her mommy
Oh,
thought he was cute,
okay. All
just to
right.
kind of feel it out. And I thought, well, that was a kind of a creative way of going around it. But I guess in a lot of ways, I've had to reimagine like what love is as a mother,
Yeah.
and that's something I didn't know what it was till I had my daughter. So in that way, I'm definitely reimagining what love is.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and what it meant to love your daughter as an infant, I imagine, isn't the same as loving her as a toddler, as a kindergartner. Like it is, I think that's been, my kids are much, much older than your daughter, but it has fascinated me how just the quality of my love for my kids or how it manifests itself. Like it's such an alive, dynamic, evolving process right, because you've never in your whole life been the mother of a kindergartner. I am figuring out in real time today what it means to be the mother of young adults. So we're like on this learning curve alongside our kids of this love that is different from romantic love, but also shares. I mean, I think you did a beautiful job in your book of exploring how the connections between your own journey and healing your tendency towards limerence, and how that healing journey took on a new depth when you became a mother.
And yeah, and also this is another additional one, but like I think having had my daughter and been reimagining love with her, just having spent time with my parents, that in some ways I'm reimagining my love for them and their love and better understanding their love for me through me watching them with my daughter.
Oh yeah. I that's I can relate to that very strongly too. Like the way that my kids, especially to my mom, invited me into a really different experience of my mom. Like not just watching how my mom loved and loves my kids, but watching how my kids are able to relate to her in ways that have a kind of liberation that I didn't really have in my experience with my mom. And then I could sort of borrow from that of like, oh, I can see how when you relate to her like that, you pull forward something in her that I don't usually pull forward because my view of her is shaped by all my years of experiences with her.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then this part about how you are supporting your daughter exploring crushes. I can imagine that any parent who's listening like feels that kind of constriction because it is like that's not easy. I mean, it might be easy for you because you've been working in this arena for so many years now, but I think that I think for parents, all kinds of stuff comes up inside of us as we hear our kids talking about crushes and attraction and right, do you share it? Do you not share? What do you do with it? And so I think there's something really powerful about you just having that conversation because I think for lots of parents, the knee jerk is to say, "Oh, you're only 5." Or, "Oh, don't focus on boys," or "Don't focus on romance right now," or "You're too young," well into their I mean, I've got parents of college students who are saying that to their college students. So I think you are modeling something really important there by inviting that conversation with your daughter and knowing that you get to be an ally and a guide and a support and a safe place for her.
Yeah, I think that was one of the quotes that I included, not from our interview, but actually from the book First Love or First Loves with
Yes, Lisa
Phillips,
Phillips.
that I think it was also on your show. And you had
Mhm.
said something about like that you really need to embrace. I think it might have been their heartbreak, but
Mhm.
still, this idea of not dismissing the crushes, but like really being present for hearing what's going on and that being really important. I think that was something you had talked about, embracing the depth and the width and something. I can't say it as eloquently as you did, but it was more specifically the heartbreak, but I think it could still apply to crushes.
It for sure applies. You're right. I think it applies to both of the facets of like just really not constricting any facet of your kid's relationship experience, whether it's the crush or the heartbreak or anything in between. I know I love that book by Lisa Phillips, First Love, and I loved seeing the reference to it in your book. That was really neat.
And her first one, Unrequited, too. I love that one, too.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so Limerence. This episode right now might be some people's first time ever hearing the term limerence. So can you just start by defining what is limerence and what does it feel like when we're experiencing limerence?
It's the best described as like a state of mind where one person is ruminating about another idealized version of someone they've put on a pedestal. They don't see their flaws. And it's like a very intense romantic crush that can become all consuming in the mind. The goal is to get that person's attention. It's not necessarily a sexual desire. It could be someone that you've hooked up with. It could be someone that you have never even met, but you just intensely desire for them to reciprocate your interest in them. There's this deep fear of rejection. It also, it can get confused as love because it has that anxious or excitement feeling, if you confuse excitement for anxiousness. And it also feels like a bit of a roller coaster. So there's the highs from if there's a sense that person has returned interest in you. There's eye contact even. There was a return of a text message. They liked your social media feed. So you hit that euphoric high. And then there's the low if you sense any kind of rejection or being ignored. And so those are some of the key factors. The other key thing is that it is really fueled by uncertainty, which, in today's social media world, online dating, ghosting being so prevalent, it's so easy, I think, to fall into limerence because there is so much uncertainty and ambiguity in relationships, especially in hookup culture too.
And it is not a mental health diagnosis. In fact, the first time I ever heard the term was a client of mine use the term. And I was like, I don't know what this term, this is a long time ago, but it's not something that therapists are taught. So tell us who coined it and what she was trying to capture in coining it.
Yeah, Dorothy Tenoff coined it in the late 70s. She's an experimental psychologist and had done a lot of research and surveys of people and spoken with a lot of individuals and came up with this term. It has nothing to do with limerick, people talk about, or liminal space even. And it's not in the diagnostic statistical manual. But there is more and more research that's being poured into it to look at it like as a psychological condition or behavior or whatever that does impair people from, being able to do their work or getting in the way of just daily life and leading to other issues. And that I do understand also being neurodivergent or having OCD or having autism can lead to somebody being more prone to limerence. And I'm not a psychologist. These are the things that I've talked to other people about.
Yeah. Okay, one more question about defining is how is limerence different than a crush? Or is it?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, you could just throw an adjective on crush, right? And say it's a deeply intense crush. The thing is that they also say that limerence is involuntary. Like it can just hit you, come from out of the blue. Even if you're even in a happy marriage, like some people have talked about how they were in this secure, happy marriage and they all of a sudden had this limerence for their coworker. So I think the difference is the intensity and how it can kind of take over your life.
Right. Okay. And so this book that you have written is truly part memoir, part cultural investigation, and part self-help book. And that was not easy for you to put yourself at the intersection of three genres. And you did such a masterful job of it. And can you tell us a little bit about why are you, at least in my mind, the perfect person to have offered us this book?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was not easy. It was very difficult because it's like you're trying to like wear several different hats, like being a journalist, right? And then switching to this memoir, deep, detailed, kind of rich description of my past limerence experiences and interviewing other folks and being sensitive to their stories. And thanks for asking that question. That I was in a great place to write about it because I had written these personal essays and explored my own issues, but I did even before I understood what limerence was. And then was also I don't like just writing strict memoir. I like exploring and trying to figure out what experts have to say and what other people's stories are as well. So in that way, I think I was well positioned for it. Also because I feel like I'd gotten over the hump of limerence, and you never know what it might strike again, they say. But I do feel like I'd gotten past that sense of the how would I say, the habits, the patterns that had led to limerence. Even when my husband proposed to me, I think we went to our therapist. It was a therapist that he had seen originally, and then we both started seeing. With him in the room, I said, I'm this was maybe a couple weeks after we got engaged, and things were good. We were just kind of like, doing maintenance. And I said, I'm kind of afraid I'm just going to keep longing for these men who aren't interested in me. And that, it's pretty powerful, I think, for a man to be able to sit in a room with his future wife and for her to admit these things. And, and our therapist said, I think you're just going to shift gears. I think you're just going to start focusing on something else. And that's something people say really helps with limerence. And it sounds so simple, but finding purpose, other purpose in your life, besides being so hyper-focused on this one person who you think will fulfill you or make you feel more perfect. Honestly, the book and also having my daughter kind of helped refocus my attention. I didn't have time to and energy to obsess over somebody who wasn't returning any kind of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so tired of it. I was so tired of that pattern. So I think in that way, I think I'm positioned to hopefully help other people with the same sort of patterns.
The tremendous vulnerability here to me seems to be the fact that I'm thinking so much about this person must mean it's my person. And therefore, I think about them more. Like, it feels like such a self-reinforcing cycle. Like, it must be meant to be. And with anything in the realm of romance, we place so much symbolism about the one and the soulmate and this, so that all that larger meaning of, if I'm thinking about them this much, it must mean. Right. So is that the kind of hall of mirrors that limerence tends to become?
Yeah, that's a good description. I never heard of it like a hall of mirrors. But I think part of it also with limerence is that you're always on a treasure hunt. It's fun to be trying to pick up clues of is this person interested in me or not? And with people in limerence, they tend to have, I can't remember the exact term, but this confirmation bias. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
You almost convince yourself that something means something more than it actually does. I'm not sure if I'm getting the description right, but I remember that that's part of the issue is that it may not mean anything, but you find meaning. And because you feel this urge to create meaning where there may not be any. And yeah, so that's true that the more that you feel like you keep thinking about that person, dreaming about that person even, it must mean something. They must be the one, and then that just motivates you, I think, even more to pursue it, even only if mentally. I was much more of an assertive person when it came to crushes. A lot of people kind of just stay in their head with the crush and maybe don't even tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
But as an athlete, it almost, for me, became an additional thing to pursue, to win.
Yeah.
Which totally backfired.
I think something that you did really well in the book, in addition to being in 3 genres at the same time, is that you helped us look at both the macro factors, like the cultural sort of landscape of modern love and how that can prime us for limerence, as well as the micro, the sort of individual, unique experiences that might make us vulnerable. And you've already touched a little bit on each, but I want to make sure that we really go into some depth here. So will you talk to us first about those kind of cultural factors and how hookup culture, right, or what I would call sort of this low accountability collective attachment disorder, is how does hookup culture itself become a primer for limerence?
Yeah, so when I spoke with Lisa Wade, she wrote this book called Hookup, what is it? American Hookup, I think.
I love that book.
And so good. And she was studying hookup culture, I think more in the early aughts. And then she discovered or came up with the kind of these rules that she was noticing as she was doing her research. And like the number one rule, or at least one of the top three, it seems like, was that the hookup be meaningless, that both people involved show some apathy, I guess, afterwards and try to act like it didn't mean anything, because to show that it was meaningful would suggest that you were like too clingy, which would be, a big red flag for, I guess, folks out there in hookup culture. So making it meaningless, it makes it really hard and leaves also people wondering, like they've made this intimate connection with someone, and then whether they've had sex or not, and then they're left feeling like they can't do anything with it. Like they can't reach out. I think you described it really well with what did you call it? The collective
attachment disorder, like this low accountability.
Attachment disorder. Yeah. Like people, am I, is there something wrong with me? Am I anxious?
Yeah.
Or, no, like perhaps it's just the situation you're being put in that makes you feel like you have this anxious attachment disorder. And it's really just a really crappy situation. So yeah, I think that piece of the hookup culture like helps fuel limerence in some ways.
Yes, because then if you're not allowed to just be with your longing, which is so natural, so normal, then it becomes forbidden inside of your own mind and your own heart. And then, of course, anything that we make forbidden takes on a life of its own. So now, instead of just having a small problem, which is that I'm kind of falling for you, and I don't know how you feel about me, I've got a big problem, which is that I have blown you up to massive proportions. I can't talk about it. I'm ashamed of it. And all of that fuels it even more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes it, I'm quoting myself from your book, it personalizes a thing that actually belongs to the system. The problem is the system is fucked up.
Right.
You're not fucked up. The system's fucked up.
Exactly. Yeah. And there was another cultural piece that I thought was really interesting that, man, it'd be so much fun to have more research on this, was talking to this, he's now a doctor. He was a psychologist out of Toronto, and he had studied song lyrics and found that these lyrics there was a connection between people's favorite songs and their attachment styles. And people who tended to have more of an avoidant attachment style tended to have favorite songs whose lyrics were avoidant. And they also found that songs had grown more and more avoidant over the past, since the 50s. I think they started looking at Billboard hits in the 50s. So it was really interesting. So, and it was unclear really if it's a chicken or the egg. Is it their attachment style that leads them to choose these songs, or the songs fueling their attachment style too? And then, like you said, maybe it's just the system that's tricking people into feeling like they have a messed up attachment style anyways.
Yeah. I was talking to, our daughter is a college student, and there's this show, Heated Rivalry, this show about these gay male hockey players. And it's so popular among straight college women, apparently. And I was talking to her about why, and she said that the thinking is, or the sort of experience that young women who yearn for men are having, is that there's so much longing in the show. This is a show really, truly about men exploring their own experiences of romantic yearning and longing for each other. And that it really has captivated women who are seeking like that affirmation of like that you also, right? That you also are dealing with yearning. Because however bad of a job we do of supporting women with normalizing yearning, I think we do an even worse job, right? Supporting men's yearning. Are there differences that you found between how men versus women tend to experience yearning and limerence?
So that's interesting. So she's saying like it's almost like the women. I've heard about this too. That the women are really interested in the show because these are gay men, right?
Yes.
That they're like, oh wow, these men have these longings too, and it's really appealing in that way. Well, one thing that I thought of too is that it's interesting though, because in a lot of movies and TV, for men expressing like unrequited love and pursuing their crush, it's okay. I think of like Say Anything with
Yeah. Yeah.
Dobler, is that his name? And, it's just like, it's so sweet. But with women, if they are shown doing that sort of thing, it's like they're batshit crazy. Like, what's wrong with them, right? It's okay to have the
Oh, yeah.
longing, but to pursue it and is seen as not being attractive whatsoever. So in writing this book, I've actually thought about I thought, is anybody going to want to be like, this cover when longing becomes your love, of breaking free from infatuation, rejection, and perfection, and find authentic love? Like, are they going to sit at the pool and are they going to cover that up because that's embarrassing, even though that's what people are dealing with? Phillips brings this up in her book Unrequited too, like how that's so, like, women's unrequited love is really seen as unattractive, but it's okay in movies and literature for men to be like assertively chasing after their loved one or their object of limerence, So, but your question you asked earlier was more specifically like, did I notice differences between men and women's longings and limerence? Not really. When I talked to Dr. Tom Bellamy, this neuroscientist who has this great site, Living with Limerence, most of his surveys have been pretty 50-50 with both men and women expressing limerence.
So the difference is not some kind of organic difference between men and women around this. It's what the culture does to men's longing versus women's longing. And I think that's so interesting that, right, in movies and in lots of media, women who are pursuing love, I mean, they're basically breaking the heteronormative script, which is that women's job in that early time is to just hold steady and let stuff come to them, right? They're not allowed. Yeah, they're not allowed to take any sort of relational leadership, from walking across the bar to say hello, to asking to be exclusive, to proposing marriage. Like, none of that stuff is, women are not allowed to be taking the lead on any of that. So it makes sense that we are pretty condemning of women's pursuit of interest.
Yeah. And for me, that was really it was hard because I feel like growing up in the 90s, where I was told to be assertive, go after what you want athletically in the workplace, whatever.
Academically.
Yeah, academically. And then it just totally backfired when it came to relationships. My parents would be like, if you're interested in a guy, ask him out. They were very encouraging, but it did not work. But I grew up feeling like anything that was of value was something that I pursued, that I chased. If I could prove my worth to someone, then that would mean that I had earned it too.
Yeah, but in the realm of romantic love, that backfired, as you said. It was just not the way you were supposed to have done it. So we talked through some of the cultural elements, but I want to talk about some of the individual risk factors and patterns in our own unique stories that might put us at risk of experiencing limerence. And you already sort of touched on the neuroscience and some of the ways in which a proneness to or an experience of OCD and ADHD. I know that you've mentioned that ADHD can fit in here. Can you talk a little bit about some of the individual risk factors that may set us up for limerence?
For me personally, the ADHD is the piece that when I look back on my patterns, it makes sense that I did what I did. I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I was about 36. It was my father who said, we've noticed that you get really distracted they had observed me with another person I was dating, and we're like, wow, she's so distracted while she's sitting with this guy. How is he going to feel like he's important or anything? So there was that piece, but also that my mind would have, ever since I was little, I would have crush after crush. And it just kind of became like who I was. That's kind of how people even would be like, I think somebody described me as having flavor of the month in high school. So it was fun. It was fun to have somebody else new to hyper focus on. And when I look back at my patterns, I was like, oh, wow, that is what I did. I could almost tell you each year who the crush was, or each, grade I was in. And from what I understand, and again, I'm not a psychologist or a neuroscientist, but from what I understand with ADHD, there's a lack of dopamine, or the dopamine gets taken up quicker. So it's with people with ADHD, they might be more prone to hyperfocus on someone to kind of get that dopamine rush from just anticipating receiving some kind of attention from that person. So what I learned, right, is that you receive dopamine when you are anticipating, not actually getting what you want, but when you're anticipating. So just ruminating about that person, thinking about what could be, would be something that would kind of would spark that dopamine. So that was one piece. Also, I've understood, like I might have mentioned this, autism and OCD. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that people had talked to me about.
Addiction. You talk about addiction in the book.
And yeah, there's so many things that are overlapping. It's hard to say
Right.
what,
Totally.
what causes what, that causes what, so, but yeah, I think there were several people I talked to who were had been through love addiction. That's an overlap too with limerence. I think that with love addiction, there's more of this pursuit, which is, I think I had some love addiction too. So there's more of a pursuit, whereas limerence is more in your head. And I talked to several people. That's what they were. It was they were at the Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, I think, group. And they were like, it's a lot harder to stop limerence than it is like an alcohol addiction or a sex addiction, because it's just one thought away, right? You don't have to go down to the liquor store, right? You can just flip a switch in your head and start ruminating about that person. So those are some of the things. And obviously another huge one that a lot of people talk about is childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. Just having like even micro traumas from early childhood that can lead to feeling like you were too much or not wanted, so like neglect. People have talked about like having a neglectful parent, an alcoholic parent. Some people have talked about being adopted. I talked about being separated from my mom for like 3 weeks early on and how that potentially impacted my sense of like, longing for something that I didn't have. So those are some of the different things that people often bring up when it comes to limerence, especially the childhood thing.
Yeah, because you've made it really clear that around limerence, there's this process also of idealizing the one who's just out of reach. And so it makes so much sense that if your father, walked away from the family, if you could see this world where if mom just stopped drinking, she would be incredible. Like this sort of like if only mentality where you aren't able to kind of reach the one with whom you so need connection and emotional safety, that it makes total sense that you bring that pattern then into romantic partnership. That's what love feels like. Love feels like yearning for the one who would be perfect if only.
Right. And somebody who feels very unavailable, emotionally or physically. And yeah, the idealization thing was a big thing that it kind of bounced back to the cultural question you asked. With dating apps, right, there's a sense that you can always keep searching for the next best one. If you keep swiping, that you'll find the perfect match. So I think that also fuels limerence, because you can keep looking for the next best person. Or you put them on with social media and online dating, you don't really know these people, but you can see a picture in their profile and be like, oh my gosh, like put them way up on a pedestal. And then maybe even not see them for several months, just create a dialogue with them online. And then, like I said, put them on a pedestal and you don't even know who they really are.
Right. Was that something that I was thinking about your flavor of the month tendency in high school, and with the was that a pattern for you as well, that once the person returned your affection or became more real to you, that then your interest would really dissipate and then you'd be kind of on to the next sort of fantasied person?
Yeah, if someone, usually I went for people that there was no way in hell they were going to show interest in me because they were like the hot senior jock, or, and I was a sophomore or something like that. And then that was safe too, right? Because then you can kind of feel like in this safe place, because you would never really have to deal with the relationship, an imperfect relationship, right? If you just keep chasing after these really high profile, or however you want to call them, people. But yeah, there were a couple crushes that when things did materialize, that's what people often say, then limerence goes away, because there's not this uncertainty anymore. Dorothy Tenoff also talked a lot about like limerence, and even two people being in limerence for each other. Like that's the ideal situation, right? But then often limerence then fades after that. But a lot of people I spoke with regarding limerence, usually what is talked about in pop culture is the limerence where it's one-sided and they're just crushing on that person who they want the attention from. But for me, yeah, if they became really available, they became really boring. And also for my ADHD mind, that was not interesting anymore. I remember with my husband when he was very available, but I was so tired of making mistakes and giving of myself that I finally was ready to like turn a page, so to speak. And I remember saying to him in the kitchen when he was making pasta one day, he kind of came in close and I was like, if you get too, literally, physically and emotionally, if you get too close, I'm out of here. And I warned him and he took that, he was like, okay, I can deal with this. But I think I had gotten to a point, if I had met him even 5 years earlier, 3 years earlier, I would have totally found him boring and way too available.
What were some of the turning points for you along the way? Because something had, it wasn't just that your husband is a phenomenal dude, although I'm sure he is. You had to heal yourself to the point that you could receive him and not push him away. What were some of the turning points for you? You mentioned sort of being almost like sick of yourself or sick of your pattern, but there must have been more to it than that. Yeah.
Well, I had a good therapist. Who was very patient.
Here's for the therapist.
And I share with most people that, one of the best, I always loved homework. I'm like, I want to make straight A's, so give me some homework. And some of the best homework she gave me was journaling every night and saying out loud, I'm ready for and worthy of a deeply loving and intimate relationship. I think writing that down and even saying it out loud helped me get in a place where I actually believed it. That was one piece. And we did some EMDR work and, looked at like family history. And it really boiled down to believing that I was worthy of more than what I was chasing after and learning to receive. I think learning to receive love was really hard for me. I loved giving it, but receiving was really difficult. I also got to a point where it was probably about a year or so before I met my husband. When I would get into intimate situations with men, I would start crying involuntarily and my body was shaking. And, I talked with my therapist about that and she's like, it's kind of like your body's responding like you've been raped. You need to listen to it and stop putting yourself in intimate situations where you feel like trash afterwards and you feel used. And often there was alcohol involved. So you can't just keep numbing yourself out and then trying to like prove to these guys that you're worthy of more because they're not giving you any more. So that was a big piece also, I think, getting to that point, unfortunately. So there was some other, in the book I talk about a big heartbreak and that and me actually pursuing the guy and not working out. So I think that kind of hit rock bottom sort of feeling. And I was turning 40 and I'm like, I've got to change these patterns. I was like 40 and a half when I re-met my husband. I say re-met because we knew of each other.
You're talking about a really integrative healing journey where I hear the elements of like sort of the family patterns and then also like healing your body. Like your body was communicating to you that you needed a kind of and a quality of emotional safety that you had to really understand for yourself. Like that you had, like so many of us, you had developed these ways of like kind of powering through, whether it's using alcohol or just however, all of us numb ourselves out, but your body was communicating to you around sexual intimacy, that you really needed to have some pieces and parts there around emotional safety and connection that you maybe had kind of diminished or poo-pooed or didn't think that you should have to need. And then you listened. And then you listened.
Right. I mean, I made a few mistakes, more mistakes, and then things started clicking. Yeah.
Okay, so as we move to wrap up, you talked in the beginning about how purpose is one of the things that really helps is a protective factor against limerence and making like sort of shifting your mindset away from romantic obsession or thought patterns into really investing and pouring into yourself. So what would you want to be whispering in the ear of somebody who is struggling with limerence and who notices these patterns within themselves? Like, what would you want to say to them about supporting themselves around purpose?
I suppose it would be for them to kind of like take, I mean, this is, the beginning of the new year. And I feel like it's a good time to take a look at basically what, where you're pouring your time and effort into and where you're feeling like it's in what way it's filling you. If you're pouring your thoughts and time into an individual who's unavailable or not returning your attention to try to shift that into somewhere else where you find more purpose, whether it's your family, friendships, career, a new hobby, a book. So with the purpose, like think about, I think the other thing is important for people who are stuck in limerence, besides just the purpose, is thinking about what's fueling, what fuel are they allowing into their life for limerence? What music are they listening to? Can they change their playlists? To like not fall into reverie over somebody because that playlist specifically reminds them of them. What movies are they sitting and watching in TV shows that are triggering those sorts of thoughts? Even though it may feel fun, and just kind of like wallowing that longing, it's a waste of time. That's something you can't get back. So I think looking at what kind of fuel you're allowing into your life for that limerence and trying to purge some of that is a good idea. People talk about going no contact. That is something I somewhat did. I can be completely honest, and I did not purge my phone of a couple phone numbers of what I call anchormen in my book.
That's yes, but which is, I mean, I have so much compassion for people who have these, because it's hard to close all the doors between social media and freaking Venmo and Zelle and all these like ways that you can see people's activity online. But that's a really important reminder, is that our brains don't know the difference between seeing somebody and seeing somebody, right? Like seeing somebody on a screen versus seeing somebody in real life. So those practices, of purging are important. And not because it's not really about the other person. It's about just as you're saying, how are you investing your own energy compassionately and lovingly toward yourself and showing yourself what you are worthy of.
Yeah. And I think actually for me, writing the book helped even heal or close some of those doors I still hadn't closed, even in the past 2 years. So I think, and they talk about, especially with people with ADHD, that it's not just, it's more than just journaling your feelings, like narrative writing where you're actually creating endings, where you may not have endings, is really helpful for healing. At least some of the research that I read, especially related to heartbreak and divorce and stuff, where you just don't have closure, it feels like. Creating closure for yourself in that area can help you move on, even if you don't have answers from that person. And you don't have to have answers from that person. I think that's the important thing to remember too. And that person, just because you've let go, doesn't mean that you've given up on somebody you thought was your soulmate.
Well, and I think the other thing I would say in this part of it, which is something I think that comes throughout your work, is really having forgiveness for yourself and compassion for yourself about why you spent those days or weeks or months or years in that limerent state with somebody, because it touches things that are so both broad in terms of the culture as well as deep in terms of our own like unique psychology. So I guess that's the other thing I want to offer to a listener, right? Is to grieve the time that you spent in that way, but not be cruel to yourself about it, because it's so incredibly understandable and compassion worthy.
Yeah, because it's so easy to beat yourself up over the time, quote unquote, wasted. But for me, I feel like it wasn't a waste, because I wouldn't have gotten to where I'm at in the relationship I'm in now if I hadn't gone through that angst.
Right. And you are so well positioned to offer your daughter something different. And you're so well positioned, obviously, to have offered all of us something different through your book and your work.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
Tough being a mom.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. All right, Amanda, I so appreciate you taking the time with me today. Please tell our listeners how they can learn more about you. Of course, we've got links to your podcast and your book in the show notes, but where do you want people to keep in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website, thank you, is www.amandajmccracken.com. You can find me on Instagram at Amanda J. McCracken, TikTok, The Longing Lab, which is also the name of my podcast. And my book is When Longing Becomes Your Lover, Breaking from Infatuation, Rejection, and Perfectionism to Find Authentic Love. A true story of overcoming limerence. So, longest title ever.
It's a wonderful title. It needed to have 2 subtitles.
Thank you. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Amanda, for that insightful conversation. I love hearing about how one goes about healing from a particularly sticky pattern, which our relational patterns so often are, and being reminded that it can be slow and nonlinear and summed up by the phrase progress, not perfection, and yet also is totally worth it. There's often grief involved because, well, shedding the skin of something we developed to help keep ourselves safe is a grievable process. Our show notes have links where you can learn more about Amanda McCracken and to her new book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover, Breaking from Infatuation, Rejection, and Perfectionism to Find Authentic Love, a true story of overcoming limerence. Until next time, be well. Thank you for listening to our show. Our producers are Mary Chan and Katie Pagich of Organized Sound Productions. Our theme music was composed by Slade Warnkin. The show is executive produced by me, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.